Hey, this is Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan. So people who are familiar with our channel's content and my live streams know that I frequently cite the Vegan Society's definition of veganism pretty much exclusively to combat these wacky and zany concepts that anti-vegans have of what veganism is. In fact, I've turned into a little bit of a drinking game on our live streams on Fridays. Where I play a little bell sound every time I have to cite the Vegan Society's definition. And I've acknowledged many times that their definition of veganism is not perfect, but no definition of veganism is perfect. I acknowledge it has pros and cons, but I personally believe, as I'll argue here today, that the pros far outweigh the cons of this definition. And the reason why I'm making this video is a few people have been asking me in the live streams and even reaching out to us via instant messages and so on that the definition of veganism is horribly flawed. This particular definition from the Vegan Society needs to be eradicated or changed immediately because it has all these terrible problems. And I'm here to discuss this because I know a little bit about this stuff. Like I said, I've been using this definition for years. I'm a trained philosopher, and I've thought through this definition many a time. So I think I have a pretty good handle as to what this definition really means, and I'll hopefully try to clear some of these misconceptions up. And I want to say from the outset, I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to name call anyone or start any drama. I'm just here to present a rational argument as to why we don't need to eradicate this particular definition of veganism. All right, so let's jump in and have a look at the Vegan Society's definition of veganism. And I'm going to focus primarily on the first half of the definition. That's the core part of the definition, the part that people seem to have the most trouble with. We'll look at the rest of it later, but let's check it out here. Veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. So one thing I think is very powerful and accurate about this definition is right at the start that veganism is both a philosophy and a way of living. Let me explain. It's a philosophy in the sense that it's a belief system. We believe, if you're vegan, you believe that it's wrong to exploit animals. It's wrong to be cruel to animals. But that's not enough. If you just stop there, you could be one of these people who claim to be, an environmentalist and wants to save all the animals, yet you go to their fundraisers and they're serving dead animals for their meals. That's not veganism. Veganism says you have to do something about that philosophy. That's where way of living comes in. A way of living where you don't exploit animals, where you're not cruel to animals. Meaning you don't consume or use animal products for food, clothing, or any other purpose. That's veganism, a belief system and a way of living that is consistent with that belief. So one huge benefit of this clear and concise statement of what the Vegan Society says veganism is, it's really easy to show anti-vegans what veganism is not. When they come on and say veganism means that you are an environmentalist, it's an environmental movement, or it's some kind of health movement to get really skinny or six-pack abs, show them the definition. Nowhere in this definition does it say anything about six-pack abs or health or the environment or anything other than not exploiting animals, not being cruel to animals. However, as a nice side benefit, depending on how you eat exactly, veganism can be really good for your health. And as a whole, veganism has a very positive impact on our environment, particularly greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, compared to animal agriculture. So one criticism I've seen from vegans about this definition of veganism is that they claim it to be more of a utilitarian definition rather than an animal rights definition. And don't be worried if you don't understand what some of these terms like utilitarian means. It basically means that it's based in like a reduction of harm. In fact, I've seen some people say that this definition is about reducing harm or suffering in animals. I've actually studied ethics, moral philosophy in college on the graduate level, and it's never occurred to me that this could even possibly be some kind of utilitarian definition advocating for the reduction of harm and suffering. I mean, just look at the words here. There's no mention of harm or suffering or the reduction of them. It's not explicitly stated, is what I'm saying. It's not even suggested. But I do want to say, if people are practicing veganism, not exploiting animals, not being cruel to animals, and following up with that by not consuming animal products, by just virtue of that alone, there will be a reduction in the harm and suffering of animals. But it's not an explicit statement in the definition, but I believe it's a logical, necessary consequence of people following veganism. So I completely disagree that this is some kind of utilitarian definition. You're going to have to show me some more reasoning, and I think you're going to have to do some mental gymnastics to make a strong case that this is a utilitarian definition, because I don't see it. It's not mentioned anywhere. But you guys are kind of right. The critics are kind of right in that it's not a animal rights based definition, in the sense that there's no mention of rights in any of the wording here, and you are right about that. However, I will argue that I believe animal rights is necessarily implied by this definition, meaning if you truly believe it's wrong to be cruel to animals, wrong to exploit them, and you live a life in accordance with those values, not consuming animal products, why would you even do that for? Because you believe animals have the right to live. They have the right to not be slaughtered, exploited, and treated cruelly. So I see this as a definition that's kind of really compact. It's just really dense, and you can pull the animal rights out of it. I think it necessarily follows, if you believe this definition, it follows that animals have rights. So now let's turn to what I think is the most controversial part of this definition, the one that has the most people upset, I think, or what people find to be its greatest weakness. And I think this greatest weakness is also one of its greatest strengths, as I'll argue here. It's the wording as far as possible and practicable. Veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals. So a lot of critics really dislike this as far as possible and practicable wording, and they say it's really vague, it's ambiguous, and because of that they think it leads to like a justification for eating meat and all sorts of weird things like that. And I think it's just a misunderstanding of what is meant by as far as possible and practicable. I think a lot of people are overthinking it, and I'm going to show you exactly how I've been interpreting it over the years, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So the critics of this wording say it allows for people who, like, say need to go to like a family barbecue or something like that, and there's no vegan food there, so it's not possible for them to find any food that's in accordance with their moral beliefs, and therefore they should go and participate in the rib eating festival. And that's not what the wording means at all, according to how I see it. Let's look at what possible means by looking at the word impossible. Impossible means not possible. You don't have options. When you're at your uncle's rib party, you have options. You can walk out and go to a store nearby and get some food. You could bring your own food with you. Or you could go through what's there and not eat the ribs. I'm sure there's got to be some vegetables there, unless your rib eating uncle is like a carnivore or something like that. But let's contrast that with no options. Let's say your plane or boat's crashed, you're trapped on a deserted island or desert island. You don't have options. You can't go to the store. You can't call Instacart or have Amazon, Whole Foods deliver anything to you. In that kind of situation, yeah, it might not be possible or practical for you to survive solely on eating grass or tree bark or something like that. That's what they're saying. They're saying basically you don't have to die if you find like you're trapped on a desert island or something like that. I know a lot of vegans, or a subset of vegans, will find this, what I'm suggesting here, is like as a horrible thing, saying that, that if you're on a desert island, you should just die for the cause. And this is not what veganism is about. Nowhere in the definition of veganism does it say you should die for your cause. If you're trapped on a desert island, guys, your goal is to survive and get back home to your family. If you're at your uncle's rib party, you have options. You can always leave. You can always find plants. That's the distinction I think some of the critics are missing. Another very important thing that this possible and practical wording leaves open for is the use of medicines, because as even the Vegan Society's website acknowledges, that in most countries, medicines, even simple things like pain relievers, are tested on animals. Sometimes it was done decades ago, but if you truly follow this definition, the definition of vegan strictly, and don't allow any exceptions whatsoever, you would be forced to die. Like, say you needed to take a life-saving medication, or you needed some pain relief or whatever. I had a tooth extracted not that long ago. I couldn't imagine them having just yanked it right out like nothing. That just would have been unimaginable. And I've had some, again, hardcore, like extreme vegans come on my live streams and say we should never take medicines, even if it's life-saving, which is completely just like just like extreme, and they're advocating. One person, I'm not going to mention their name, told one of my longtime viewers and friends that she should just die for the cause because she needs to take pretty much a life-saving medication, and it was tested on animals, as every FDA-approved medicine is here in our country. It's not possible or practicable to find a medicine that wasn't tested. And I'm not advocating for testing. It sucks, but this is what the Vegan Society allows. They're saying don't die. And it was horrifying having a vegan try to argue that one of my friends should just die, leave her family and kids behind and just die because she's vegan. That sucks, and that's not what veganism is about. Veganism is not a death cult. So it's examples like these that I believe is the true intent behind the wording as far as possible and practicable in the Vegan Society's definition of veganism. It doesn't mean that, oh, I'm lazy, I don't want to leave my uncle's rib party, or like in my example here, I went to an Angels baseball game last year and I thought there'd be vegan stuff there because, you know, it's Southern California, vegan stuff's everywhere. And to our surprise, there was pretty much nothing, just like Cracker Jacks and pretzels. I mean, we had to do some Googling, like, oh, okay, we know this pretzel brand. Oh, we looked it up. All right, yeah, it's vegan, so we got that. But, you know, someone who's less inclined to do the Googling just could have said, oh, there's nothing here. It's not possible for me to be vegan. I'll just eat some kind of dead meat hot dog or something like that. And that's not what they're talking about. You're not going to perish at a baseball game is what I'm saying. You're not going to die of starvation. That takes a long time, as opposed to a desert island. You know, you could perish if you're not rescued in within a few weeks or a few months. Anyway, another example I want to bring up of why, a different example of why I think this wording as far as possible and practicable is actually a good thing, is it shows that veganism doesn't mean absolute 100% perfection. Like if any animal gets harmed in any part of the food production process of plants, that veganism is debunked or something like that. Like you have idiots like Piers Morgan.
They fly in billions of bees to create your almonds and avocados, and in that process, several billion bees get murdered. Billions of insects get murdered.
And therefore we're hypocrites. Like, no, it just as far as possible and practical. If, you know, a bug gets harmed or a rodent gets ran over by a truck delivering the food to the supermarket or something like that, it just means we live in an imperfect world. It says nowhere in the definition of veganism that we're perfect moral beings and there's no harm of any kind whatsoever. It says as far as possible and practicable. It might not be possible for no harm whatsoever to happen to any sentient being in the production of plants. So as you see, the Vegan Society's inclusion of the phrase as far as possible and practicable turns out to be a two-edged sword. I think it's a two-edged sword in the sense that on one hand, it can easily be misunderstood as to what they mean, and that's on them. They could probably do a better job explaining that, maybe in some follow-up literature, some wording after the definition. So that's the con. But the plus side of including this verbiology in the definition is it shows that veganism does not mean or entail or require absolute perfection, zero harm, zero suffering, zero cruelty. If an animal might unfortunately unintentionally get harmed in the production of food, doesn't mean veganism is null and void and we all should start eating steak all day. And again, it allows for the use of things like medicine where it's not possible or practicable in all circumstances to find a cruelty-free alternative. So as you can see, I personally see no need, as some critics are calling for the Vegan Society to get rid of their definition or radically rewrite it. I believe they could do a better job in a few areas. For instance, making it more clear as to what the intent means as far as possible and practicable, since that seems to be like, you know, the thing that everyone that dislikes this definition really draws attention to. And I'd be really curious, if you work at the Vegan Society or you know someone that does, have them watch this video and let me know if they believe that my interpretation here of the intent of those words, if I nailed it or if they have some other thing they want to say about it. But I think I got it, and I believe it's not a philosophy devoid of animal rights. as I said, if you truly believe in not harming and exploiting and not slaughtering animals, you believe animals have the right to live and not be exploited and not harmed. And like I said, I don't believe this is a utilitarian philosophy at all. I don't go around thinking, how can I decrease harm or suffering today? No, I live a life where I don't consume animal products for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And that's why I got into veganism in the first place, that I knew it was wrong to needlessly harm, slaughter, and exploit animals when I could live a life where I don't do that. Eat plants and wear clothing that doesn't have animal products and be just fine. So anyway, guys, I don't want to start any wars, and if you disagree with me or the critics, be kind and respectful in the comments. If I see people start talking like an a-hole and disrespectful and not being civil, I'm just going to delete your comment and just block you if you're just outright just a horrible, mean person. So don't do that. I'm a philosopher, and I like discussion about things like this, so engage kindly, civilly, and philosophically if you like. So anyway, hit like, subscribe, hit the join button up there too, become a channel member, get all our cool perks, and until next time, guys, remember, doesn't suck being vegan.